Penn State wrestling fans, we are back here at PennLive. It's the PennLive Wrestling Podcast. I'm Bob Flounders, joined as always, it's only been a couple podcasts, but as always, by Jim Carlson, who is doing a bang-up job covering Penn State wrestling for PennLive. This podcast is also going to, as it unfolds this year, will also deal with Pennsylvania wrestling in general. We're going to have some more guests. Jimmy and I have been working on a list for you for some guests. Hopefully that'll come on in the next couple of weeks. But Jimmy, we're recording this on Wednesday, mid-afternoon. Penn State is still throttling people, really throttling them. They have a road date at Nebraska this Friday night. Nebraska is not a bad team, Jimmy, in the Big Ten. I believe they just knocked off Minnesota. But I feel like, Jimmy, you and I agree that they're in the wrong place at the wrong time on Friday night at the Devaney Center. It's a 9 p.m. kickoff, wrestle-off. East Coast time, 8 o'clock out there. Penn State's rolling, Jimmy. We got a lot to get to on this podcast. We were both up at Cael Sanderson's availability on Monday. I thoroughly enjoyed it, even though it was brief. I always enjoy listening to Kale talk. I also had a big kick out of, you were looking at me. We're in the center, and all these guys are getting ready to practice. And I didn't know all of them, but I recognized some of them. And nonchalantly, all these like superhuman wrestlers from teams past are just walking by, no big deal, just kind of head down, looking at us, giving us a nod, giving Kale a nod. And these guys are just terrors on the wrestling mat, former Penn State wrestlers. And you kind of looked at me. It's kind of incredible, just kind of how it's an intense place to wrestle, but it's also kind of low key. I kind of enjoy that about Kale and how he has his operation set up. But let's talk, Jimmy, about a couple of things. First up, Penn State versus unbeaten Penn State versus 6-1 Nebraska. Nebraska's not bad, but Penn State's just a lot better.
Yeah, Nebraska's number 5 right now in Flo's team tournament rankings, but just a couple of quick numbers for Penn State. I mean, they're 7-0 off a 55-0 shutout of Michigan State, which was its 4th shutout of the year. They're 2011 and 12 and 13, I believe. They had 5 shutouts, so I would think they would at least equal that mark, if not break it. I think there's at least one shutout coming more, possibly another one. The margin of victory, Bob, so far is 46 to 1.3. So I've never seen anybody score 1.3, but that's the average. It's starters. Penn State starters are 101 and 2, and the 2 losses were to number 1 ranked wrestlers.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, both of those wrestlers are out. Ryan Crookham from Lehigh apparently broke his elbow, and I believe he's out for the year. Keegan O'Toole, who beat Levi Haynes, is out for the month of January. I'm pretty sure he'll be back, but we all want to see that rematch. The only person not ranked in the top 10 is Luke Lilledahl at 125. That's only because he really hasn't had a significant victory yet. You know, he's had some nice wins. He's 9-0, been in control, but he hasn't beat a highly ranked guy yet, which would be his chance on Friday against Caleb Smith. Nebraska's trying to set an attendance record at the Devaney Center. They're calling it the Coach's Challenge. So I, wouldn't doubt that they would. They're pretty strong in the front 5, the opening 5 guys. They're going to drop off a little in the bottom 5, especially the last 2. They have absolutely no chance of winning the last 2 matches of the night. We'll see what the match count is. We can get into that later. But Mark Manning, the coach, just won his 300th win over the last weekend against Minnesota, which was a nice win for them. Just to rehash Manning, if we will, I don't think he has a lot of love loss there. I think there's no love loss for Penn State there after the Olympic trials last year. To just to recap, Jordan Burroughs, one of the best wrestlers ever, was wrestling Mitchell Messenbrink from Penn State, and he defeated him. When he got up, he pushed Messenbrink's head into the mat, and the Penn State fans took umbrage to that. And then Burroughs later lost to Jason Nolf, a former Penn Stater, and the fans were all over Manning and Burroughs, and Manning didn't let it go. He could have just walked off, but instead he chose to engage with fans and steam coming out of his ears. And it was it's sort of an ugly situation, actually. Mm-hmm. But Manning, I just read just minutes ago, he's ready for Penn State. He says it's going to be a great match. He says, not that he's counting, but he says Penn State hasn't lost a match in 1,809 days. Right? I think he might be looking forward to it. He shrugged off their upset loss to Northern Iowa. He said, nobody's going to remember that on January 5th come March, which is true.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty intense in Lincoln on Friday night.
Yeah, Jim. So regarding that availability on Monday, by the way, Penn State wrestling fans, if you're fans from maybe out of the state of Pennsylvania, let me just assure you, I made the drive up from Harrisburg to be with Jimmy, talk to the wrestlers in Kale. It is still really cold in State College in mid-January. Jimmy, with that wind howling, it felt like it was about 5 degrees. Typical State College weather. The first thing you said to me when I complained about it, you said, well, this is as warm as it's going to get for a while. So I kind of appreciated that sense of humor from you. But we were up there, Jimmy. And so Kale eventually chatted with us. We also got Luke Lilledahl and Greg Kerkvliet. Nice on that pronunciation. I enjoy talking to all three of those guys. Let's start with Greg because he went first against Michigan State, which was kind of neat. That doesn't usually happen. The big guy went first, took care of business, and he went first in the interviews. I think it was you that asked him about, competition and just kind of, this might be a bigger test, but you haven't had much. But he kind of, I thought, had a pretty interesting answer about, maybe right now and maybe for a little while, Penn State's biggest competition is from within. It's in the wrestling room. It's trying to improve. It's going against really talented workout partners and maybe former wrestlers, but they are very much of a team that is hell bent on getting better, and it doesn't really matter if they win a match, handily, which they have been doing. They are very focused on improving, and they believe that they will improve just because of the way that Kale and his staff handle things and the competition within the room. I think I have that right.
You do, and yeah, his answer was very quick about whether a step up in competition this week. He goes no, because we are challenged every week in practice with the best training partners in the world. His partners, for example, would be Jake Varner, an Olympic champion, Cael Sanderson, an Olympic champion, Casey Cunningham, who was not an Olympic champion but an NCAA champ, and is probably the toughest guy in the room, is what all the wrestlers say. Kirk Fleet goes against it. Plus Kyle Snyder is in there.
Yeah. Oh, that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. He might have won an Olympic title or so.
Yeah.
Kirk Fleet probably doesn't win every time he competes in a practice room. He's very pragmatic about it all, and not exactly outspoken, but gets right to the point when he's talking about things like that.
Yeah. Like I said, and I think he won last year. I know he won last year, but he's brought up. If you look at his resume, he's ran into some really tough kids that have prevented him from winning probably more than one national championship. But I also thought I like the dichotomy because they brought him out and then they brought Luke Lilledahl out. So not exactly the same.
125-pound difference there.
Yeah, not exactly the same sized wrestlers. Enjoyed Luke as well, a freshman. Like you said, the ranking isn't there yet, but it's going to be. He is a tough customer. I love the nickname, and I love how Kale just kind of said it matter of factly though he's talking about him, Lightning Luke. Like he didn't even smile when he said it. I'm like, did you say Lightning Luke Lilledahl? And then you told me it's because of the way he wrestles, scores a lot of points, entertaining. But I think all the wrestlers, even though they know they're going to win the match, they love going on the road to kind of strut their stuff and not strut their stuff, but just show kind of what Penn State wrestling is all about. Luke has one of the one of the bigger matchups, maybe the premier matchup, I think, in the Nebraska match, going against Caleb Smith, who is I think top 5, top 6, top 7 wrestler. A guy that is going to be a tough customer. But Luke, I just wanted to. I wrote something on PennLive. He's got a big smile on his face. You can tell he's done great things on the national stage, not just on the collegiate stage. He's really going to be something. He already is something. He's really going to be something though once he kind of gets comfortable. But I asked him about just wrestling on the road, and wrestling a good guy on the road. And he's like, when you're on the road, everyone's rooting against you. And I think that just kind of pushes me to wrestle better too. So that's probably my favorite thing. The fans that want to see their guy win, I'm here to win. And I just think that attitude, he wasn't bragging, but it's like, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter where they wrestle. They're going to be focused. And I think they might enjoy wrestling on the road almost as much as they enjoy wrestling at home for that reason.
Well, I think that's true, and I think you mentioned it to him about being the villain, and he liked that role.
Yeah.
They've talked a lot about traveling and sort of for lack of a better word, the bonding that the team has on the road. The various roommate situations and dinners and flights and things like that, and it's where a team gets close. And the coaches have always talked about that. And so they have wrestled in all kinds of situations. And even, last year at Iowa, it doesn't get much crazier than that. And I think it'll be very similar on Friday, but it's not a scene that can shake this team. I really don't think so. And if anyone would be, it would be Lilledahl, just because of his freshman status. And he's had so much international experience that, I don't think anyone really is worried about that, including himself.
Yeah. That I really enjoyed all of those guys. Just the way that Kale, I've talked to him a couple of times over the years, but my Penn State football commitment coverage, don't get to see him or watch him or watch the team wrestle nearly as enough. That's going to change, but just a guy that's really, I don't want to, maybe not down to earth, but just very serious, dry sense of humor, but just you could tell. The focus is always there with him, and that explains a lot about the success he's had as a wrestler and as a coach. And I think obviously the Penn State assistant coaches and the wrestlers follow his cue, and that it's a down-to-earth team that is very serious, Jimmy, when it's time to wrestle. I wanted to move on to another wrestler.
Well, just one, let me interrupt there. We're talking about Kale. It was interesting just the other day. I was cleaning out my digital recorder. They'll used to call them tape recorders, right? But so it holds 100 recordings. I was up to 98. I thought I better make some room. But most of them, the bulk of them are Penn State wrestling recordings going back to probably 2014 media days with Kale. And so as I was cleaning some of them out, it was interesting to, number one, he gets the same types of questions, maybe not word for word, but try to word them differently. And it was interesting to see to hear his answers. And while not verbatim from year to year, but the same, he never changes. And it's always the same philosophy, always about the kids, and how they can get better, like we were just talking about. But you could listen from one press conference to another, and the message is always the same. And I think you had just mentioned that he was just, sturdy in his beliefs, and it shows.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, because I thought one of the most interesting answers he gave at the availability for me, as somebody who's just kind of getting caught up to speed, was, I think it might have been your question. You were asking him about Mitchell Messenbrink, the Penn State wrestler who's unbeaten, 11-0, 2 forfeits, 9 techs. That's a tough record to argue with, really. Point machine, but I think it was you, Jimmy. But I don't want to say Kale's face changed, but the word expectations came up, and he just he wanted to make a point. I don't know if he paused, but that kind of caught his eye, and he was asked about expectations with regard to Mitchell Messenbrink, who is a fantastic wrestler. He said, I think that's a word that could really hinder people, expectations. Really, all we're looking for out of Mitchell is to just be himself and don't change, right?
Yes, and he doesn't. I mean, if anybody fits in that camp, it's Brink.
Yeah.
And then I think we might be able to get to him next week to talk to him. We haven't seen him much this year. But yeah, 9 tech falls. He's wrestled 42 minutes out of a possible 63 in those 9 matches. Could be 63 minutes. He's wrestled for 42 minutes.
Uh-huh.
I totaled the points the other day. I forget how many they were, but it was a couple hundred that he scored. So yeah, it's just an impressive guy. Second in last year's NCAAs. I think he had a little misunderstanding with the clock. He wasn't quite sure. He might have thought he was tied, but I lost 9-8 to David Carr, multiple time national champ. So yeah, Brink is, I don't want to call him a lock this year, but he's certainly a heavy favorite for 165 title.
Yeah. 2 things to get to. It's the PennLive Wrestling Podcast, talking specifically about Penn State's team, unbeaten team, number 1 team. They're gonna wrestle at Nebraska on Friday night. Nebraska's a good team, but they're just out of their weight class in this one. Jim Carlson and Bob Flounders here talking. Before we wrap this up, just 2 things after the Nebraska match. They are on the road, I believe, the following Friday at Rutgers before Iowa comes to town. I believe it's on the 31st at home. That's the marquee. That's got to be the marquee match on their schedule. I know that place will be crazy for that. But Jimmy, we didn't get to one item from our previous podcast that I found very interesting. I think you did as well. And let's just get to that now. We have a couple of minutes. It caught your fancy. It involved Bo Bartlett working with assistant coaches Nick Lee and Casey Cunningham. And I guess the big change this year is he's gotten to know and work with Cunningham a little bit more. And Bo really appreciates kind of Cunningham's approach. Not that he doesn't he doesn't appreciate Nick Lee's approach too, but Cunningham, I think in Bo's mind, is a straight shooter when it comes to coaching. And I think that's what that's what Bartlett responds to. If he needs something to get done, or if Cunningham sees something that he needs to work on, he won't pull any punches, and he'll just tell Bo, this is what you need to do. This is what cost you last year. Jimmy, it sounds to me that you think this is a really good fit, maybe Cunningham working with Bartlett.
Yeah, Bo brought that up himself. But he said, he doesn't sugarcoat anything, which is what Bo likes. And some people don't like that.
Right.
But Bo is not that person. And he said that Casey told him that the rear standing position last year cost him a national title.
Right.
And Bo said, nobody else is going to tell me that. Mm-hmm. He says, so he tells me things I need to work on. And he concluded it by saying, and they're being worked on. And so, Bo's an interesting dude, a psychology major, I think, and very well spoken. And as far as Nick Lee goes, he used to compete with Lee, and so he said Lee has that feel. If he's about ready to, try to snap him down, Lee can feel that, and he can correct, certain positioning with that. And so that's the key about actually wrestling somebody more his size, as opposed to Casey, who just would outmuscle him, but is eager to tell him the little things to make him better.
Yeah, Jimmy, I gotta say that to me is so fascinating about this Penn State team, that what we're really talking about with Bo and Cunningham is that they're to the point now where I don't want to say the slightest of things, but one thing, literally one thing, if you're singular of purpose, is kind of what Bo is not going to obsess about, but that's really what the priority is as the season unfolds. They've got it down to some of these guys are so good that they know that it could just be the slightest of things, really, that separate them from being, a national champion. And it sounds to me like that's going to be really fascinating to watch how those two are going to work on that. And I bet you're going to follow up later in the season and ask Bo how it's going regarding that one thing. But only only at a program like Penn State where they won so much. I think, can you really narrow the focus down, really, as you get better, to one specific thing? To me, that's incredible. And it speaks to the focus and the detail that is really going on within this program. And it's not necessarily about, dual meets. Not that it is in wrestling most times, but that's just very. It speaks to the focus, I think, of this team, and they know what's ahead of them, and they're gonna get to it. And I just don't know that how many other wrestling programs you can say that about.
Right. And if let's say there's 6,500 people in Rec Hall,
yeah,
probably 6,495 of them do not have the eye that Casey has, that Kale has. When Casey throws a challenge block, Brick,
yeah,
he usually wins it. I mean, he sees the smallest of things,
right?
And they don't throw a lot of challenge bricks, but when they do, and they don't always win them, but oftentimes whatever he thinks he's seen, he has actually seen it. And even if they wouldn't win it, if something, then they take it back to the practice room, saying, well, this position you were out of position here, out of position there, like we were just talking. But yeah, it's the eye they have for the sport is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Jimmy, great chatting with you again here on the PennLive Wrestling Podcast. We're going to wrap it up. Penn State is on the road Friday at Nebraska. Big crowd. And I think Penn State's good with the big crowd because they like to be entertaining. And I don't know that I think the crowd will be revved up for it. I don't know how revved up they're going to be. Maybe by the end of the night, it's going to be a tough pull for Nebraska to get remotely close. Cael Sanderson's team. After that, at Rutgers, and then Iowa. You very late in the month. But Jimmy, you and I will be up for the availability. I believe it's next Monday as well. And I know, looking forward to hearing your reporting and your thoughts on how Penn State fared against Nebraska.
Well, Bob, I don't make. I used to make predictions, and I sort of let that go. But on Friday, I think you can conceivably call the first 5 bouts as toss-ups. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know. But record-wise, rankings-wise, you sort of have to do that. I think I see Nebraska maybe winning 2 bouts overall. I mean, you ask them that, they'll probably think they could win 6, but I don't see that. So 8-2 would be a decided advantage for the Lions.
I would agree, Jimmy. We will be back next week on the PennLive Wrestling Podcast. And don't forget, Jimmy and I are working on a guest list. We have some names on it. I think the wrestling fans, not just Penn State fans, but the fans of Pennsylvania wrestling will really appreciate. We're looking forward to bringing that to you here on the PennLive Wrestling Podcast.